it again. So one of the things that we seem from time to time to, hey guys, I want to get you guys out of here as fast as possible. But one of the things that we want to talk about that we find as TMs across our geography is that we struggle with scale. As our dealers get to their first, 5 or 10 probes and they see kind of what the initial workload looks like, one of the things that we're trying to, use this panel for is to give some tips, tricks, hints, like how did their journey start? And then how did it get to the point of scale that they're at? There are some folks in this room that have an exponential number of probes. But as you look at some of the rain-fed environment that Scott and Cassie are in, and then Brandon being up north, like a little bit different dynamic than, say, Nebraska. And so we wanted to share that with y'all to see or let you see how they did it, how their journey looked, right? Because it can be a little bit of a daunting task to scale up with probes. I mean, it's not like you just chunk it out in the field and off you go. I mean, there's a little bit to it. So some of the questions that we have, and it's really just a discussion of, how did we get going? And so Brandon, we'll just kind of do some intros, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll kind of do the Q&A after each one of y'all do the intro.
Okay, well, my name is Brandon Meyer. I am from the southeast part of North Dakota. My first conference was February of 2020. I was actually still an NRCS employee at that time until I started July of 2020 at Hoffman Irrigation. It's a family-owned business. They've had it since 1988. So, yeah.
I'm Cassie Mish. My business is Platinum Ag Services in Northwest Indiana. So I'd say we serve the northwest quadrant of Indiana and a little bit into Illinois where they start to have specialty crops. I started being a dealer about 8 or 9 years ago with Legacy Crop Metrics and then just stayed through the transition. And a year or two prior to that, Scott and I actually go way back together in this, but I'd started a crop consulting business a couple years before that. And so this was a natural fit with customers I already had.
Sorry about that. So I'm Scott Budke, and my son Nathan and I run Budke Precision Ag, and we're in Central Illinois. We started. My family's been in the irrigation industry since the late '60s. When we started using traveling guns and that, so we're in a pretty specialized pocket in Illinois. So started working with the John Deere probes in 2009. And started working through and then met Nick Emanuel and Sheldon, got to working with Cassie, and so we're doing quite a few probes now.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. So one of the things that I think a lot of people are curious about, so like when you started on this journey, I mean, yeah, you said it was a part of your business, but like, was there something else driving it? Like, did you see a demand? Was it a niche that you got into? Kind of tell us a little bit about like some of the why behind it. And then as a follow-up on that, did you have like a guinea pig, right? Because like anything in ag tech is kind of on the bleeding edge. It's buggy, if you will, right? Like it's never going to work well. You got to have some political capital with these people that you're working with. How did that all begin at the very start? Because I'll have some follow-ups to.
I'm kind of like Alvy. We have trouble with the mic. Sorry again. So kind of I've always been the tech kind of guy, and I was working with the John Deere. I was working at a John Deere dealership, and that's how I got into the water management, was through that platform. I always knew that we needed to be careful because, the aquifer might not last as long as we need it to, and water is going to be always a precious thing. So I felt the need that we just irrigate in Illinois. They just turn it on and let it go. There's no regulations, and so I feel we need to be better stewards. And by doing the irrigation management, and that is trying to put the word out there.
Um, actually, I guess to give a little bit of history, I started in it because at the time, we were in Circus Services, agronomy services reps, and they had a water management pilot program. And so we thought, okay, we'll try this. So they ended up not moving forward with that. But we as dealers who had already started it went, wait, this like a probe and recommendation service is actually kind of cool. So how do we continue this on our own? But I just got to thinking that, I mean, we're working with these growers doing seeding better, nitrogen better, soil testing better, scouting better, and no one was doing anything with irrigation management in the area. So I guess I saw it as a challenge, an opportunity that I wasn't really competing against very many people, and it's a fun thing to try.
So we got into it because of irrigation water management with NRCS. In 2019, some guys got a contract and they had to have probes. And Ken Goodall had convinced my stepdad, Chad, to try CropX because he'd heard about them and said they were going to do good things. So he became a dealer. And we started with 6. And when I came on in July, when I started to expand it there.
But one of the things that I think I'm curious about, and I hope the audience is as well, is like, if you think about any growing business, whether, it's CropX or you at a local level, was there like a defining moment where the scales tipped and it's like, I got a big grower, or the coffee shop was talking and everybody had positive feedback? Like for each of you guys, like what was that moment where, you went from 6 to 10 or whatever the number was in the beginning to you get to 50, 60, 100 plus? Like what did that look like? And then how long did that take? Because I think for some of the folks in this room, and even myself, right? Like as you're trying to grow your business, like you want exponential growth, but sometimes it's just not a reality. So were there moments that happened, or like tell us a little bit about that? How did that trajectory start off? Because you didn't start off with 50 or 100. It took a little bit of effort.
Well, being I came in July, it was partway through the season. So I just took the rest of that season to learn the probe and how to read the graphs and kind of build on what the sales strategy would be for that fall. So then I went through the reports and kind of learned everything. And then that winter is when I just started to push them hard. I just compiled a list of all the growers I know personally, and then I just cold called everybody. Then we went from 6 to like 45, and then 45 to 90, and then 90 to 150, and that will probably be around 200. So every year we just kept adding about 45 more.
Awesome. My very first year, I started with 7 probes, and the second year was 17. And I was like, geez, this is slow. And the third year was about 34, I think. And I'd say it was I'd say years like 3, 4, and 5 is when it started to double. And I think that's just, I mean, for a couple of reasons. We already talked about the retention rate for the services is over 90%, and I would agree with that. So once growers get their own experience, they're going to decide, they know if they like it or not. And then it's fairly easy to ask, oh, do you need another one here? You need a couple more there. And you get to the point where it's really fun and they say, oh, I bought a new farm and it has a pivot. You go, you need another probe there, don't you? Yep, yep. And so it can get a little bit easier to sell to current customers. But also I'd say year 3 or 4 is also the point at which your name starts to get out there more, and growers talk with their seed person about irrigation, and the seed person says, I don't know what to do. But they've heard that you've been in the area a few years doing the service. So you start to get a couple of referrals a few years in, and then just growth with current customers.
Yeah, I would say the same. We started, before Nathan came into the business, I started with, like Cassie with in-circus services, water. We started with 10 and kind of thing went to 20 and 30. And, at 50 by myself, I was kind of thought, well, that's about it. And especially with the technology, then we were spending time and time going back to the probe because it wasn't transmitting, had to reset it and all this. And when I believe in something, I'm very passionate about it. And I think every irrigator out there today should be doing some type of irrigation management. So when I would get a no on, no, I just don't think that's too much. I can't spend that. It really became offensive to me, and I tried to think of ways we could build it. And we changed our strategy. And when Nathan came into the business in about 2019, instead of having the mindset of, well, everybody needs to do it. Well, we went kind of the opposite and went and targeted the people that we knew would do it and tried to get them to do their whole farms. So we grew that way. We went from, we're over 150 probes now. And just by picking those growers that want to do a better job has spread. It's kind of like just contagious catching on because they spread the word because everybody looks up to them as the guys to watch.
Information. So to kind of continue on this same path. So one of the things that I also get hit up is like, well, how do these guys do it? So give us a little bit of a background on the workload, the logistics, right? Because we were sitting at dinner the other night and Randy, when he said that he did, over 100 himself, I'm like, you're a machine. I was like that. I'm a younger man and I would be a little bit, nervous about getting that all done. But like, so how do each of y'all do that? Because, right, like when you're in the 100 to 200 range and even beyond that, I mean, logistics and planning play a big part. So, give the audience a little bit of background on that for us.
So that is my son's deal. He's the organizer of this. So like we'll meet together with all the growers most of the time. And then he'll sit down and make a list and have every probe ready to go assigned to that grower and everything. And we load up and he'll go one way and I'll go the other way and we'll meet back. And he's got the route for me planned. And most of these probes were going back in the same places. So the probe location is very already established. So that makes it a lot easier. And then if we do have a new grower, one of the things that we started doing a couple of years ago is probe placement was always a big determining factor for the grower. Because if they don't think it's in the right spots, they're not going to believe the data. So in the wintertime, on new growers, we would sit down with them, even maybe jump in a side-by-side or whatever, and go mark the location where they wanted the probe. And that really boosted our growers' confidence a lot too.
I will definitely agree. Pick your locations before you go. That will save a lot of time. I'd say I think it was the first 2 years since I only had a few. I was just installing mostly myself. It's hard to think back that far already. And that gets real fun thinking, you over time you can get efficient with how do I carry all the tools and got a pretty nice backpack for that. Still trying to figure out how to carry the drill a little bit more efficiently. Maybe someday we'll get there. But over time, I think it's like the third year, I decided to get a gator just for speed and ease of use or lessen the labor from doing all the walking. So that helped and honestly made it a little bit more fun too, right? 20-inch rows are a little bit of challenge. You still have to walk a lot of those. We still have those. But I just got to the point where I started hiring, I'm going to say summer interns. So I had one help. Now I have 2 help. Now there's 4 of us every summer. So I like to install in teams of 2. I'm very amazed at the guys like Randy, or I know several of you just do it by yourself. I like 2 people. I think it helps just alleviate the exhaustion load. And then also you can have 2 people doing stuff at the same time. One person is connecting the cables, one person zip tying the antenna. So I think you can do it a little bit faster. So just slow growth over time, and each year you figure out what's the new challenge, what's the new limiting factor, how can I do this faster? Do I need another gator? Do I need another person? Do I need a different way to carry this thing? I'm going to say one of the biggest things that I think helped our workload a little bit, maybe I was stupid in the beginning, but I used to use T-posts to attach everything to, and that's a terrible idea. It's very labor intensive. And then gosh, if you send a piece of metal through a combine, that just scared me. So we got more efficient in the type of posts and mounting that we use. So now it's very quick. Drop it in, tie it up, go. So you just think along the process, what's my limiting factor?
So I start in February and March. I bring every producer in. We go over their report for the year, see what they like, didn't like. Then I ask them where they want the probe, and they either show me a spot in the field. If they don't have a spot, I use the field productivity map option in the app, and we kind of look for the average acres they're planning for and then put it there. And then about the first week of May, I'll start charging probes. And then by the end of May, they start going out, and I schedule them by crop type. So I'll start in corn, work my way from there, finish in beans and potatoes. But yeah, it's just me doing it. I just have a side-by-side and a Milwaukee pack-out system I use on the side-by-side. I use orange driveway markers to put the antenna on and just electrical tape it to it. Yeah.
No, that's all good information. One thing I will preface, so Scott and Cassie are more into using telemetry, a drill and drop style probe. You're more in the V4, is that correct? So a little bit different dynamic across dealerships. So let's switch gears just a little bit. So, you know, you guys are at a pretty good scale. So when we think about the future, I mean, you know, when you think about your operation, are you at a happy place? Do you want to grow? I mean, right, like when you get to a certain level, it's like, well, what is the next horizon, or are you content? I mean, both I think are acceptable, but I think it's a little bit curious for the audience.
So I should be content where we are, but my competitive nature makes me want to keep selling more. And I think we're getting to the point where I'm not going to be able to do them by myself for much longer and still get them all on the ground. I was lucky last year. We had a lot of bean acres. Otherwise, I would have fallen way behind and things would have got difficult. But we'll still push. We're going to push the weather stations hard now and more ET sensors, try to level out on the V4 probes a little bit for a while.
Yeah, right. You always want to grow, right? I'd say for the last couple of years, I personally have been pretty happy where we're at right at 120 probes. And that's just a couple life reasons. We had another kid and et cetera. So we're ready to grow again. I have always liked a slow, steady turtles pace growth. And I'm sure the sales team doesn't want to hear that. But I think that's worked the best for customer retention, for the ability to solve problems, to, like I said, figure out what your limiting things are over time. If I got 50 more this year, I don't know what I'd do. So I'd like to keep growing, but I think, 10 a year would be a nice slow steady for me.
Yeah. So we took a pretty good growth in the last couple of years because we had some bigger growers we added. And I would assume Nathan and I've talked, you know, we get to that 200 level, we figure that's kind of going to plateau unless we can find an intern. And we've thought about talking to the local community college about seeing if they could, you would have an intern that we could use for installs and stuff like that. So I guess we're probably going to look at maybe an intern. I hope.
Excellent. So as we kind of get towards yep, in the back.
Cool. Thanks. That's good.
Very good.
Everybody
Good
got
option, yeah.
I just wanted to sneak in a question, Todd, if I could. So all three of you do other things than just probes, right? So talk about cross-sell opportunities, and maybe there's people in the room and that's all they're doing right now is selling probes. And if they had other services, they could grow their total business. I'm sure you've gotten probe sales because of something else you were doing on the farm, vice versa.
Yeah, for us, so our season starts, we'll do about 40,000 acres of soil sampling in the spring. So that soil sampling business and we do some agronomy business as well. That has definitely helped our probe sales in that area.
Yeah, if you're already working with someone and they already trust you, it's a very easy, natural sell, I guess, to do the next thing. And it's not usually too hard. Well, I mean, there's always some challenge in convincing a grower to try something new, but they like hardware, right? And it's also not something they can get from 10 other people. And they like to try new things, I think, too. What was the Oh, yeah. Yes, and I was trying to think, I don't know that I've gotten, so where we have customers where they're CropX only, we got introduced to them through a referral or they were interested or something. I'd say that's a smaller portion of the customers. Most of them I was doing other things on first. But it's just like anything. I mean, the more they trust you with either service first, the more they'll do of other stuff.
So being a Ranky dealer, we have that on top of it. My main job is the CropX probes, but I help when needed around the office or out in the field. But we carry parts and we do service for all three irrigators, Ranky, Matic, and Valley. So things can get busy, especially in June, and I have to plan to be out all the time. Some mornings are quite hectic and they don't always go to plan.
This is kind of more of a statement for you to think about as because we're getting towards the end of the session and the answers have been great in the interaction, but are there things at CropX that we can do to help you, right? Like if you guys, and I would say, and I hope you encourage everybody else, there's a lot of access to people in different departments at CropX, whether it's at this event or you call your TM, right? I mean, Scott, Cassie, you guys know that there's a lot more access, are there things that you've mentioned to John Gates or Nick that, would help at your scale that you're currently at that you didn't experience when you had 5 or 10, and you can answer it if you have some things or if you don't, but, food for thought and for the rest of the group. I mean, that's the great thing about coming to this and talking about as you grow your business is that you have people here that can help, get some of those barriers out of the way. Do y'all have any of those? And again, if you don't want to answer, it's by no means required.
So I think there's two big things that's helped us in the last few years. One was the new gateway. We use all the CropX gateways. Before we got to those, Nathan was in the field fixing probes every day, and it was just time consuming. We had to fix probes before we could put more in. So the one thing that we have had very little problems, sure, we've had some issues, but with the support help, Todd, Shelley, Ben, everybody, that's been the next thing. I can't say enough about, I told Tomer this yesterday that that's been one of the biggest things that's helped us is the support staff that they've got for us to help going forward. So I think we should all thank them as well.
Yeah, same. I'd say my thoughts are very similar. I mean, I think one of the number one things CropX can do to help us scale is to limit our time in the field. I mean, if you spent, talked about, sounds like you guys are solving the problem, but when you install a system and it takes 45 minutes to get a notification and you're standing there and going, I got to put 2 other probes in already, that really, really limits how you can scale. So limiting our time in the field. And I would say I do feel like you guys are making great strides, great improvement. I agree, support is great. That's a big, reducing the number of times we have to go back to a field.
Yeah, same. It all comes down to the support team being there pretty much whenever we need them, whether they're just being a counselor that day or we have an issue.
Well, fantastic. So as we wrap up, any closing thoughts that you had as we kind of went down this journey, and I'll tell the crowd. So I sprung it on. Oh, question. Oh, if anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in. But I didn't prep them for the questions. It's like, hey, I just want this to be very natural. Just talk about how you grow your business. As we went down this journey for the last almost hour, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with the group that maybe we didn't get to about any of the things you see, the tips, the tricks, the scalability, CropX, any of that you want to share?
I'd say the biggest thing is just reach out to people, do cold calls, meet up, get with your seed dealers. We have a Pioneer seed dealer, the regional guy. He's a big help. He pushes them like candy. So that helps a great deal.
This probably goes without saying. I just think it's worked really well is, man, if you just provide awesome service and you fix something before they see it, you actually do your notes and recommendations. You bring up things to the growers. If you actually care, do it well, make it easy. Even like I used to sell the probe systems, thinking that if the customer purchased it, they would be more likely to stay long term. I've totally switched that now to a leasing, and now the risk is on me, and that's And that can be harder, but it's an easy button for the grower. I'm not telling them they have to charge them for another battery or blah, blah, blah. Just find ways to make easy buttons and I'll take care of everything and help you through this. And then it gets quite a lot easy to keep retention and keep asking for more of them.
And I guess along my ways through just reaching out and talk to my fellow, Cassie and I during the summer, we'll talk a lot, just picking each other's brain, or I might call Todd or Shelly, just whoever. Some of the things that you're not thinking of at that time they can remind you of, that can save you a lot of time.
This has been a great discussion. So any questions in the crowd before we wrap this up? Nobody? Oh, there we go.
So our program is we charge the grower per probe. So we're right at $1,500 a year. That includes him install extraction we do, and then we give his agronomic as much help as he wants. That's one thing that we try to talk to the grower about and say, okay, do you want us to talk daily? Do you want us to talk weekly? How much interaction do you want from us? Because when they're busy and you're trying to pester them, that could be just as bad as good.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, so I mentioned I switched to all lease, but at some point you have to decide that you're willing to take that risk yourself because there is a risk there. But it just, yeah, one price, install, remove, maintain. I store them all, I clean them all, do everything to make it easy for them.
The leasing didn't work in our area. They didn't like the idea of not owning it. So I offer up the service of install and extraction, going out there, handling it, looking at the graphs. And they like that where they don't have to touch it, but they still own it.
So I'll go the opposite on that deal. Precision Agronomy here. We actually lease all of ours. And the reason we went to that is, first of all, we can deploy any sensor, any field. When you're dealing in quantities, you can't go back and get Jack's probe. So we went to the lease side. It's so much easier. If one gets, you get a sensor that's bad, it's kind of like we're self-insured. They don't have to go back to the grower and go, okay, you've had your probe 3 years now it's bad. And so we do a self-insured. I'll go back to the other part on our biggest driver on getting some of the new customers too is actually we put field flags when we install the probe. We got flags at the end of the field to guide us to go in. When you get the numbers and they go to an area and they see our flags everywhere, they feel, and this guy isn't irrigating, they feel they're kind of left out. So then they'll just call us from the number on the flag. So it's kind of fun.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nick? Oh, Nick, you got some stuff you want to do for? I don't know. What do we have left? You got me confused. I pulled this out of left field, man. What do we got now?
Yeah, this would have been more fun to preface this discussion with, but I think this will be kind of a cool experiment. And yes, I did actually test this, so this should work this time. So if you want to scan this again, there's just 2 questions we wanted to pose as to like limiting factors and thinking about like productivity levels throughout the season and how that impacts your scalability. You guys can chime in too, like, once you see the question. So the question is like, what one main activity throughout the year limits your growth the most? And I think we probably all know the answer, or at least I have my hypothesis, right? Especially after hearing their discussions. But I think it's a good thought experiment. Oh, interesting. It's not what I would have guessed. Yeah, see, there you go, sales guys. Yeah. I would have expected it to be installs, honestly, after especially this discussion. So I mean, that's good. I think maybe even some input for next year's agenda, huh? So one other question, and this is my technical mind thinking, and you don't have to spend a lot of thought on this, but if you break down how many units you have, probably how many hours per week you spend or how many minutes per week you spend on each unit, where do you think that falls? Because for me personally, that number has changed a lot over the last 3 to 5 years. And to be quite honest, where we're currently at right now, or at least where I feel like I'm at, I'm probably in that 1 to 2 minutes per unit per week range. And that makes a huge difference on your ability to scale and your ability to deploy more units. Yeah, Tim's saying, yeah, there's a lot of like tips and tricks. And so that's certainly one of the things we want to share here during this time is some of the ways we do that. I will say that a big part of that is having growers that are more experienced. A grower that's on year 5 is a lot less time consumptive than a grower that's on year 1. So, the more new growers you have, the higher that number is probably going to be. So kind of some interesting results there, kind of all across the board. This is a slide that was recycled from last year. So as you guys know, like you don't want to go to the field again, right? And so things that are important are auger choice, drilling depth, whether or not you want to choose offsets, making sure you've got your caps on. Brandon's got an awesome repair kit. I'll show you that image later, and making sure that you're not going to have to do any repairs. And I broke these categories down into what you guys probably mostly all talked about would be labor, software features, and custom tools that you've kind of designed to help make your workflow easier. Scott mentioned this, route planning. I've talked to a couple different people throughout this time talking about how you're determining that location ahead of time and sort of planning out your route and your workflow. And Brandon, you mentioned like doing corn ones first versus beans. Like, are you using some kind of a tool to, you have those points all determined somewhere?
I kind of go geographically too. I go closer to home, then move out from there, and then planting dates. Not everybody likes to plant at random times, so.
Yeah. That first time you go out, you remember that you forgot like 3 or 4 different things. And so you do the one close to home first, right? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And then by the time you're done, you're like, I was just getting good at this again. Yeah. Here's something that, was provided by the dealer that's not here. And so that's kind of why I wanted to bring these in, because I kind of texted some of you and wanted to bring in some of these ideas for the room that weren't able to be here today. And this is not one that I ever would have thought about. So work with me here. When you go to a field page on CropX, that website, that page is static. So you could save that as a favorite in your browser. And what this dealer has suggested is you actually create a folder for each grower. And so you could save field A, B, and C. And if you right click on a folder in your browser favorites, you can open them all in one click. So that was kind of a cool way for somebody like that to say, okay, maybe this grower's got 20 fields. I right click, open them all up, and they're all loaded with one click. Yeah, I'm probably going to do that. Sure. I see. Yep. So talking about some of those farm level features that being added.
That on the dealer page? Ideas.
So yeah, Scott was talking about sort of a community level interaction between all of the people that use CropX. We were just having that discussion yesterday about how to make that exact thing happen. I don't have an answer for you at this point, but that's certainly something that I think would be beneficial for a lot of people.
We have all the things. Yeah, Tahoe haven't done it.
Yep. This was a little bit of a refresh from yesterday's efficiency recs. Basically, the idea of sending bulk recommendations to a grower. At some point, there's probably a grower that has enough fields that don't want a 1-by-1 recommendation. And so sending more of a full report that contains all of the fields at once. That's sort of my standard practice at this point. And most of those are just delivered via email. There's different flavors of growers that want different types of communication, but for us, this has worked pretty well. We talked about Google Earth Pro at some point yesterday during, what was that, Felix's? But this is your friend. And there's so many times when just looking at some of the historical imagery can answer many of the questions you have about why a sensor looks the way it does. And there's plenty of examples, and I think Ben will have some examples of those in his next session. It is available on web now with all of the historical imagery. In fact, I was just helping Esteban troubleshoot some graphs at the end of Monday or Tuesday, and we pulled up that in Argentina. And we learned very quickly that this was a brand new pivot because you could clearly see that it was a pivot on CropX's satellite imagery, but there was no record of any pivot being on it within the Google Earth history. And so we very quickly learned like this is a brand new irrigation system that probably has an impact on what we're seeing. Just a plug for, especially I think those future features where we're going to be syncing the planting date and some of those other things. That's going to really speed up that workflow, some of that manual data entry that you're worried about for planting date and crop. This goes back to the controller discussion. Frequently throughout the season, you're probably wondering, is that pivot running? I wonder what that grower's doing right now. Do you guys ever get that? For me, I have tried to either gain access to their controller accounts, like some of them have just shared their username and password with me, or there's some platforms that you can do sharing of different devices. So you might have your own dealer account on a controller platform to access and see what those pivot statuses are. Just another plug for trying to get those third-party connections into CropX. Because it's important to know what the status of that pivot is so that you can make sure that your recommendation's accurate. Switching gears just to some practical stuff. Here's some images shared from some of you guys in the room and some of you guys remote. Just different ways to store the sensors, to charge massive amounts of batteries. Yeah, be careful. Here's another storage solution shared by another dealer. They said this has worked well. They've also organized it by like serial number groupings in case they have to go find a particular serial number after the season. It's easier to sort through a handful rather than the whole shelf. Okay, this has one of my favorite one of the whole day. Is that second bullet point. And this was shared by a dealer that's really scaled in the last several years. They are using Fiverr or Upwork in order to pay a virtual assistant to handle some of the like mundane manual data entry tasks. And so, especially during that high peak labor time, when you need to be doing other things, that person can be assisting you doing some of the stuff that you could be doing from anywhere in the world. So I thought that was a really cool add-on. I'm sure that you could probably find some reasonably priced labor on those platforms. Another thing is trying to get the invoicing and paperwork done prior to planting. I think there's a lot of varying levels of why somebody might think that's a good idea or not, but in terms of workflow, that would certainly get a lot of things out of the way. Another good one I've used in the past is just Google Forms. You can create something as simple as just, here, I'm going to text you this link, and then you can tell me what your planting date and crop is, or field name. And then it populates that spreadsheet for you. So if you want to pull that back up, I'm just curious here. What is your preferred or best form of communication with your growers? And I think there's probably a mixed bag from what I've had as personal discussions with you guys offline. And I would say for me personally, it's probably text message. That's the most effective way. You're going to get quicker responses. But I think it probably goes back to that like level of experience. Like, do you find that newer growers probably lean on more personal or phone interaction rather than experienced growers, which probably just want you to text them? Depends on the age. It is a little bit surprising. Yeah. Text message. Nobody chose email. So yeah, that's the dinosaur communication, I guess. Interesting thought experiment though for our notifications within the platform. Here's just some basic things that you should throw in your repair kit. Make sure you have what you need at all times so that you're not running around. There's your kit, Brandon. And I recognized what was in the background. Who was in Lincoln in, what was that, 2022? Oh, yeah, that's his prize, man. I remember picking that up from Shields. That's a big water cooler, and you must use it then, right? It was a good investment on CropX's end. Brandon's not gonna dehydrate out in the field. Make sure you use your caps. I just wanted to play this. I put a little GIF in the PowerPoint here to just show one example of what that historical imagery can show you. And if you look at where that yellow pin is and you keep watching what that band of soil looks like through that area of the field, this is like throwing all the red alarms at me, like probably not where you want to put the sensor. We provide the split loom as something you can order on the CropX store. It's something you can just apply to the antenna cable. If you do have rodent issues, that's something that can help slow them down. Again, reducing field work. Got a few more minutes here. In this example, I wanted to show how unbelievably variable this field is. And this is without that the high contrast turned on, especially in places that are next to rivers. You all have probably seen this kind of variability in your precision ag world. But this is a tool in CropX that really helps me with sensor location, with identifying issues with sensors in the season. Look how. Okay. But yeah, so there's that buffer turned on for that same field, and it just goes to show you how incredibly useful this tool could be. Anything to add to that, guys? Like, have you done a lot of satellite imagery usage? No. I think a big part of that will hopefully be the loading times and things like that. It is both available on mobile and web, so you can access that in both platforms. I don't have anything else, guys. Hopefully those are some tools and tips that you can take back. Anything else you guys want to add after going through some of those examples? No?
If you're a Ranky dealer, consider that geode if you don't have one for marking for extractions, especially in cornfields. Its accuracy it saved me hours this year. Hey, Jake, if you're not a Ranky dealer, can you get a geode? Okay. Yes.